We're going to talk more about the election in Hungary now with Ian Bond, Deputy Director of the Centre for European Reform. Ian, thanks for taking the time to speak to us. We just heard there's several reactions from different European leaders to Magyar's win, and Orbán has systematically been a thorn in the EU side. How much is this new Prime Minister going to help the European Union?
Well, I think one can be cautiously positive. But I think that your correspondent there was correct to flag up that not everything is going to change. He still has some reservations about Europe's relationship with Ukraine, which probably are going to get in the way of some of the things that many other members of the EU would like to see in terms of a quicker progress on Ukraine's membership application, for example.
Now, the German Chancellor also weighed in, saying that for him it marks a heavy defeat for right-wing populism. Do you think that was what was behind this win?
I think this showed the limits of right-wing populism in Europe. The problem was that over the 16 years that he had been in power, Orbán had been quite successful at distracting the population with external enemies, whether that was George Soros or Zelensky to some extent, or migrants or whatever. But this time, I think people were looking at their own personal economic situation and finding that 16 years of right-wing populism had left Hungary with an economy that was in a pretty bad state, worse than the state of many other European countries. And I think there's a lesson there for populists in other countries. The culture wars will only get you so far. If people feel that their wallets are empty, they are quite likely to vote for somebody else.
It's an interesting point because Orbán even rolled out the big guns, if you like, bringing in U.S. Vice President Vance to campaign for him. Do you think that might have hurt Orbán in any way?
It certainly doesn't seem to have helped him. I think, the Trump administration is not popular in many countries in Europe. And I don't think there were a lot of Hungarian voters who said, my goodness me, Donald Trump is backing Viktor Orbán. We really ought to vote for Orbán. I think, at best it was neutral. At worst, it probably put some people off.
Now we have Peter Magyar's party that crucially looks to have a 2/3 majority. Talk to us about the importance of that big a majority and what kind of things in Hungary could change.
That's important because it enables him to change the constitution. And Orbán had done a lot of things over the years to change the constitution to entrench the power of his party. I think if Magyar had a narrow victory, then there would have been a real risk that, rather like Donald Tusk in Poland, he would have found that the remaining institutions of the old regime would have been able to block progress. With a 2/3 majority, I think he has a good chance of being able to reverse some of these constitutional changes. And he's already made clear that he wants Fidesz loyalists in important positions to resign. Now, some of them may go more easily than others, but in areas like the courts and the media, it'll be very important for him to be able to clear them out and to re-establish a more democratic way of doing business and a more rule of law based way of doing business in Hungary.
Where does Magyar stand on social issues? Orbán, for example, put policies in place that were anti-LGBTQ+. Will Magyar change those?
I don't know, honestly. He himself was a member of Fidesz for a long time, and therefore, is probably somewhat conservative in his attitudes. But I suppose the question is going to be, whatever his personal views are, does he think that this is part of his road back to favor in the rest of Europe? And therefore, is this something that he's prepared to compromise on, even if his personal opinions may not coincide with it?
Indeed.
So I think we're going to have to wait and see.
You also mentioned his opinions on Ukraine, and one thing the European Union is going to, of course, be watching closely is what his approach to Ukraine is going to be. Do you think there is a little bit more wiggle room where perhaps Hungary might support Ukraine more in its war against Russia?
Yeah, I mean, in the election campaign, he said, and I think your correspondent referred to this, that he was not going to supply weapons to Ukraine, and he was not in favor of accelerating Ukraine's EU accession. So I'm not expecting that he's going to have an overnight conversion and say we're now going to start pumping out weapons for Ukraine, and they should be allowed to join the EU by the beginning of next year. So I think he may be less obstructive on the question of EU financial aid for Ukraine, but there are other countries in the EU that will probably continue to cause difficulties on that, notably Slovakia. But clearly he's not as virulently anti-Ukrainian as Orbán was, and I think we can expect that there will be an improvement in relations between Budapest and Kyiv.
Ian, thank you for that. Ian Bond, the Deputy Director of the Center for European Reform.